morning again. I'm Andrew Keating with Internet2, and I'm joined by Deb Witten from Arizona State University, Bob Flynn from Indiana University. And for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to talk about how universities have been collaborating around cloud service evaluation and delivery. So, it's Thursday morning after a long conference week. I hope everyone's had a good week here and that we can keep this fairly informal. We each have some slides that we'll present. We then also would like to hear from you with questions and comments and discussion. So please feel free to ask us questions as we go. We'll have some time for discussion at the end, and we'll go from there. So to start things off, I want to tell a little bit of a historical story because 5 years ago, an EDUCAUSE, NACUBO, and Internet2 white paper around shaping the cloud really framed out some of the core issues that higher education is facing in the new landscape of cloud services. This was authored by Brad Wheeler, the CIO at Indiana University, and Shel Wagner, who was CIO at UC Berkeley at the time. And what they framed out was that the coming years would be defined by a move to cloud services, and that universities and educational institutions would need to collaborate and find ways to collaborate in order to make the most of that move to cloud and be able to take advantage of the growing market of cloud services to help fulfill their academic mission. So this was 5 years old. This was published in 2010. You can go online and read it. And like anything that's 5 years old in the technology world, some of the predictions turned out to be right. Other things, haven't quite come to pass. But the idea that they framed out was that higher education needed to find ways of collaborating in order to engage constructively with cloud service providers. So as a result of that white paper and groups of CIOs getting together from the Internet2 member community, and Internet2, of course, runs the National Research and Education Network infrastructure, and it is a community organization of about 300 leading universities. So a group of those universities got together in 2011, 2012, and CIOs designed a program that we call Net Plus, which was designed to leverage community capabilities like the Research and Education Network infrastructure, like federated identity. It was designed to influence the cloud industry. So rather than one campus alone engaging with a cloud service provider, it would be a group of campuses. It would be the whole community engaging with that provider. And it was really designed to benefit national scale and even international global scale research and education activities. So, the cloud market continues to grow and grow. So if you think about 2012 to today, you're talking about cloud services going from a $50 to $100 billion industry, now approaching $250 billion industry. And so the universities getting together to form the Net Plus program under the auspices of Internet2 was really, designed to engage constructively with those cloud service providers. And so what do we mean when we talk about cloud services and the cloud computing market? I'm assuming most of you are technologists who know, have some idea of what we mean when we say cloud services. But when we think about the cloud market from an economic and dollars sense, the cloud market continues to grow. So, by 2020, software as a service will account for $133 billion of the $160 billion industry. Infrastructure as a service is going to make up, additional, billions and billions. And so this graph shows the growth of the total public cloud market. So at the same time as the cloud market as a whole is growing and becoming an even larger share of the overall technology industry, what you see on the other side are graphs that show the price decreases for Amazon Web Services over the past few years. And so you have a situation where the market continues to expand and grow, but the individual cost of services, the individual cost of cloud infrastructure, Amazon has had dozens of price decreases over the past several years, and the volume basically continues to go up. The prices per unit continue to come down. And so when we think about those kind of economics, the key question is, how do you find the best services? How do you evaluate? How do you vet those services? How do you find in that large and growing market the service that is going to best suit your campus, help your researchers, your faculty, your students deliver what you need to do. So that is the real kind of challenge. And in the past, in the technology world, we're all very familiar with assessing based on features, functionality, based on price in some cases, and the cloud economics just completely change those sorts of calculations, while at the same time preserving some of the skills and techniques that have been useful in prior generations of information technology. The key question for all of us in the education community is, how does a community with just a few % of spending help set the direction for this growing industry? So as the cloud market overall globally is in the hundreds of billions of dollars, all higher ed technology spending is about $21 billion combined. And this would be hardware, this is traditional on-premise software, this is everything combined. So Bank of America alone, for comparison, is about $3 billion. Other financial services companies are spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. Healthcare companies are spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on technology. So how do we in the education community influence this growing market while our overall aggregate spend compared to some of the commercial for-profit industries is relatively low? And I think the key to that, and what the Internet 2 Net Plus program has aimed to achieve over the past few years, is to collaborate and to provide a mechanism for collaboration among campuses, so that while alone we might be smaller pieces of that $21 billion, that if we work together and if we collaborate together, we can have an outsized impact from what our own individual spend might be like. So what does that impact and what does that influence aim to achieve with cloud? We need to really strike the right balance between openness, standards-based solutions, innovation, and then things on the other side of the equation, which were commercially designed services, services that are just work right out of the box versus customization. And so what is really key, in addition to being able to influence that large and growing commercial cloud services market, is the higher ed community being able to work together in order to define common sets of specifications, standards, things like security vetting, things like FERPA compliance for handling of data, privacy standards, things like that, and also customize features and functionality for these services so that we're not simply using the same out-of-the-box solution that a Bank of America or a financial services firm might be using. In some cases, that might work for what a university would be needing, and the solution might be acceptable as is. But in other cases, there would need to be tuning and tailoring of that. So the Net Plus program, to come back to that and what was developed a few years ago, and we can talk more hopefully in the discussion about Net Plus and how it all works, but at a very high level. Over the past 3 years, the campuses in the Internet 2 member community that have developed Net Plus have led to 32 cloud services being available through this program. Nearly 90 campuses, I think this slide may be a little bit out of date, it may be over 90 by this point, have participated together in validating those services and in developing those services. Over 600 active cloud service subscriptions to those validated services, and 370 campuses participating in total. So that's actually larger than the Internet 2 member community as a whole. And so what this points to is the fact that Net Plus is actually open to non-members of Internet 2 as well as to member campuses of Internet 2. And we can talk a little bit more about that and how it works. Net Plus is organized around several different portfolio categories for different types of cloud services. So we have infrastructure and platform service offerings, and these are things like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure and Box and CrashPlan, things like that. We have software as a service as a category, which are like the LMS services, portal services, things like that. Video, voice, and collaboration, which are video conferencing, video collaboration solutions. Digital content is an area that the universities have worked on as well. Although there aren't any active programs in digital content, for cloud today. This is an area where there have been programs in the past, and the universities continue exploring that. And we also have a portfolio category for security and identity services. So the higher ed community for quite a while now has been a leader in thinking about federated identity and identity standards, and now we have a situation where for large research universities they may run their own identity infrastructure, but for other campuses wanting to use and consume cloud services, they need to have, for lack of a better word, identity in the box. They need to be able to have a turnkey identity solution, and there are cloud service providers that actually do that. Security as well is an important area, as I think many of us are aware, and there are standalone security as a service type solutions that are being validated in NetPlus as well. So how does NetPlus work? And to signal a little bit about the service lifecycle that we have an inquiry and evaluation phase, and in those phases, Internet 2 member campuses bring forward services. In some cases, we have companies and service providers that come to Internet 2 and say that they have a service they'd like to make available. So those first two phases are an initial vetting of a service. Then during the service validation phase, a group of Internet 2 member campuses, and again, in some cases non-members as well, will get together and go through a standardized process for cloud service vetting, assessing the security, assessing identity, assessing features, functionality, developing a common contract, developing common pricing so that everyone is paying the same rate for the service and there aren't special deals for some campuses over others. Once that service validation is complete, assuming those universities sign off, the service moves to an early adopter and then to a general availability phase where other campuses can sign up and consume that service. We do also have a sunset phase because the cloud world moves very quickly. Some services that are available today, next year, 2 years from now, the company gets bought, the company no longer offers the service, the community no longer likes the service, and so then it's moved out of the catalog. The contracting vehicle for NetPlus, and we can talk a little bit more about this later, involves a master participation agreement between the campus and Internet 2, and then a service schedule that is added to that participation agreement with all of the details about that specific service that have come from the service validation activity. So this has been 3 years of continual learning and growth from the higher ed community. We've been very fortunate to have a number of leading universities partner together and work collaboratively. And I think as I turn things over to my colleagues here on the panel, you'll be hearing more about how Arizona State, how Indiana University have approached cloud services. Indiana and ASU have both participated in many NetPlus service validations, and we're leading institutions in helping develop the NetPlus model. So I will, with that, turn things over to Deb Witten from Arizona State. Deb.
Thanks. How do I advance that arrow? All right. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? So I'm Deb Witten from Arizona State University, and I'm going to talk to you about the factors that drive us into cloud services. What are the motivators that make us look toward cloud solutions first? I'm also going to talk about some of the challenges that we encounter with cloud solutions. And these motivations to go to the cloud and these challenges around cloud services are not unique to large institutions like ASU, so there's lovely ASU in Tempe, Arizona, but these factors apply to all of us. Whether you're large or small, public or private, it doesn't matter. We all have the same drivers that make us look to cloud solutions, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, a more generic approach. So what drives us to cloud solutions? Well, we have aging infrastructures. We certainly have old data centers. These are data centers that I've worked in, actually, in the past. Every time we want to implement a new application, an enterprise scale application, then we have to go buy servers and probably racks, and we have to find space in a data center. In my case, we're out of data centers floor space, just completely out of it. We have no more capacity. On our campus, it's in a city, it's gridlocked, there is no room for growth. So we really have to look for some strategic solutions to large-scale enterprise class deployments, and cloud is one of those that allows us to do that. We also have a need for being able to keep up rapidly with the change in innovative technologies. As higher ed institutions, we all have to try to figure out how to make everything mobile, and we have to be quick to deploy and quick to keep up with whatever the students, faculty, and staff want within the institution. So just basically trying to stay current with the rapid pace of innovation has made it a challenge because we don't have the resources to do it. We can't educate and train our staff. We can't support our apps well enough to be able to keep up with that pace. That's another issue that definitely has driven us to looking at cloud solutions because they're faster to deploy. One of the key features for us in some of our applications that we've searched for and ended up going to the cloud as a reason of being is the ability to scale or be able to burst into the cloud with usage whenever we need it. In higher ed, we have these cycles of peak performance period. Like right now, 3 weeks before school starts on my campus, students are calling in about their financial aid. We have this cyclical period before school starts. The week that school starts, your learning management system gets all of the volume, the transactions, the hits, and it just continues to go up and down like that. We're a little different than traditional industries in that we have these types of cycles. We know we have these cycles. So rather than buying enough licenses, buying more licenses than we need in order to accommodate those cycles, what we can do with cloud services is we can buy just what we need and then we can burst or expand over what we need during those cycle periods. And we work with the vendors to negotiate those types of arrangements. Internet 2 has helped us a lot, these folks, because they're pretty good at doing that and they understand that we have these cyclical characteristics. A lot of the vendors don't understand that and really don't care, but we influence them with that. So this is one of the things that really has been advantageous for me and for my institution, is being able to buy only what we need and then be able to expand that during those peak periods when you need more. And clearly we just don't have enough resources and skills in our current IT staff. And I have a large IT contingent of people, and we still don't have enough people to do all of the work we need to do on my large campus. And so whether you're small or large makes no difference. I've not heard anybody here at this conference say we have more than enough people to do the job that we need to do in our IT organization. So. And then if you have them, then you have to train them. So every time you want to buy an on-premise solution for an enterprise app, then you've got to invest heavily in training. People have to ramp up. They have to develop the skills. With cloud services, they already know how to do it. The company knows it. The vendor knows it. And you can deploy very rapidly that way. If you have a institutional leader with a very aggressive mission, then you also have to be able to keep up pace with that, and cloud solutions help us to do that. This particular president of my institution has made it very clear that technology will not impede this institution's ability to move forward very rapidly. Knowing that, it makes us keenly aware of the fact that we have to keep up with everything that they show up with everything that they want to do. It's all about measuring outcomes for us right now, and it's all about student success. So we are constantly changing our gears to focus more on what's the next thing that's going to help the students succeed, what's the next thing that we can help them do. So in order to keep up with all of these technologies, we have to be looking at cloud solutions because we can deploy them much faster. And I'm going to make a comment for Internet 2 here because for the Net Plus service program, because to me a big factor in being able to look at cloud solutions and to do this effectively is this community that you get through Internet 2 Net Plus, this community buying power. So a lot of the vendors that you want to go to a cloud solution with, they're not really interested in a community buying arrangement because they like to sell to each of us individually and they like to have a different pricing structure for each of us individually. But if we get together and we work with Internet 2 and we go to these vendors and we do a security review together collectively, we all have the same outcome there. If we go through the contract negotiation together, then we construct something that's amiable that we all like and can accept. And so this really turns out to be advantageous, especially for large schools like mine, where we just can't afford anything, because when they say, how many users do you have, and we say 86,000 students and 25,000 faculty and staff, we've priced ourselves out of the market. So these vendors have to be a little bit more flexible with some of these larger institutions. So a lot of these products are priced on a tiered structure, and I think I'm going to let Bob talk about his experiences with some of these products because he is a cloud manager at his institution. That's kind of his role. So it's really nice if you have an institution that has a role like that. So those are some of the advantages, in my opinion, the things that drive us to cloud services, but there are certainly barriers to entry and there are challenges. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. First and foremost, everyone will tell you about security. It's definitely a big challenge and it's a big issue. It's a big concern because this vendor has your data, your institutional data, in a space in their environment, and you don't know where that is. And so the questions are, what are they going to do with it? How are they going to protect it? Who has access to it? Who has access to the data? How are you going to get that data back out? And do they know anything about FERPA and HIPAA and other types of privacy issues that we deal with in higher ed that maybe other industries don't deal with? This is a list of the top concerns from CIOs that were polled on what they considered to be concerns or barriers to entry for cloud services, and this came from a CIO review publication just recently. We thank our colleague and friend Jack Seuss for providing this information, but these are in the order of importance that they were identified, and you can see security clearly up there as the #1 item. Legal contracts and purchasing are really major issues around this, and this is where you get a lot of help with the community buying activity and the support from the NetPlus Internet 2 folks, because they've done this a lot and they have a lot of knowledge around how to do these contracts. You have to practically train your procurement staff when they go through this because it's all in the cloud. It's another vendor is holding your data. You don't own it, so to speak. So you've really got a lot of logistics to work out with them in order to make that work for you and be advantageous for us as a higher ed community. Certainly identity management is important to all of us because we want single sign-on. We want that kind of transparency within our applications to make it easy, but we have to provision with permissions and accesses as well. And we want control to do that. So we are reluctant to hand off control of all of those things to a vendor that's going to put our stuff out in their cloud somewhere. We have to retain a fair amount of that administrative right. Again, I said procurement is a major challenge. I'm going to say that again. You really have to work with your purchasing folks because a lot of them have not had to do these types of contracting before. Even your legal offices may not have had to go through something like that before. So it's different than just buying from a vendor and installing on-prem and managing your own application. Now you're really developing a partnership with this vendor. It's not like I buy it and I go away and I don't have to talk to them anymore. So here are some of the additional challenges that we came up with as a group from our experiences, and I talked a little bit about security. Part of security, too, is what's the exit strategy going to be when the relationship is over or if it terminates in an unfavorable way. How are you getting your data back? Are they going to put it on a disk and mail it to you? Are they going to download it someplace? Are they going to charge you money for that? Because some of them do. They charge you to get your data back. So there's a lot of logistics and legal ease around that has to be worked out long before you ever ink a deal with some of these vendors. You want to make sure when you're done with them that you can actually get your information back. And we have to support practically every device that every student, faculty, and staff member shows up with on campus now. And that could be 3 to 5, really. I mean, I have 3 in my bag over here behind the podium. But, I mean, they literally, when the students show up, Christmas is the best time, right? That next semester when Christmas is over, because they all come back with the things they got for Christmas, and they bring more devices with them. New gadgets, new devices, wearable technology. How are we hooking up and interfacing with all of these things, and how are we going to work with these cloud service vendors to make sure they understand our need to be adaptive to our population, to our customers? And so the complex contracts, I said, were a big issue, and they are. There are people actually, Internet 2, NetPlus folks are really good at this, but they also know people in the higher ed community that actually teach classes on this. So if you're in the NetPlus or the cloud services negotiation business, there are people that you can contact. If you contact Andrew here, he can put you in touch with people who actually teach classes on this, and your procurement staff can get a pretty good ramp up and training program. And it's very helpful if you do that. It helps them understand what you're trying to do, and it helps you get through that process faster. And I did mention already this vendor relationship because it's like permanent. Once you make that purchase, once you're into that cloud business, now you have a partnership with this vendor, and you can't just you can't just go away. You have, they have to talk to you about when you're going to upgrade, when they're going to make enhancements. You've got all these things to deal with. You can't decide when you want to do things, like when you own the system on your own premise. Now you have to work with somebody else who's thinking about a larger body of users. So those are challenges. And now Bob Flynn from Indiana University is going to talk about his experiences, and as I said, he is sort of the director of cloud services for that institution, which is kind of a nice role to have. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. All right, I just got a field promotion there from Deb. I'm actually manager of cloud technology support for Indiana University, and clearly I have a slightly different slide style than the others, so bear with me here. So what I want to talk about are the standards that help us, the standards we'd like to develop to help us work through the rough points that both Deb and Andrew have pointed out. So first of all, let's talk local at our institution. So Deb mentioned a number of the stakeholders that you have to get on board. So you've got your security, policy, legal, purchasing, data stewards, all of those folks. And at the front of the line of we are afraid of the cloud boogeyman is your security office, because they're paid to be afraid of the cloud boogeyman. So hopefully you can pull these people together into a conversation to help you streamline the adoption of cloud services, because if we don't, you got to have a cat slide, right? So there's the cute cat slide. So when you're going to be deluged over time with the requests for cloud services, large and small, whether it's researchers wanting to use Amazon Web Services for their big number crunching, or some small office that has received a cold call from some vendor and said, that's the best thing I want. And so they go straight to purchasing and say, hey, we've signed this contract, will you put it through? And the purchasing office, if they're prepared for this, says, no. We're not going through that yet. You have to go through this process, because you have your gatekeepers of your data for the university. You have each of these people have very important responsibilities, but you really need to work together and really have a coordinated team. And I'd like to say that my institution was already there, but we're in the process of getting there. A coordinated team that can take these, and not every new request or interaction is oh my God, the cloud. You've got to get past the oh my God, the cloud part and get down to what is actually relevant. And if you can't scale like this, you're going to quickly drown under the requests. So we have a notoriously conservative group of data stewards at Indiana University. Took me 18 months to get approval for FERPA data in our box implementation. Every new vendor that comes along, by the way, brings their own storage with it. Find one bit of storage and then hammer your vendors to say, look, I've already got all the stuff I need here. I don't need more storage. So each of those, in our case, we have a data steward over each type of data. So you've got your HR data steward and your student data steward and your donor data steward and all of that. Each of them has a constituency that's going to be bugging them to say, hey, I found this new product, can we use it? And if there's not a process, they're overwhelmed just doing their daily job. And part of that is there needs to be some level of discovery. So you have these contracts out there. I was talking with my purchasing person recently, and she said, oh, I've got all that data, which contracts we have. So I use an 8-campus system. So we have some contracts that cover just individual campuses, some contracts that cover the entire institution, some that maybe just a school bought, but others could buy into it, that pricing. It's a crazy hodgepodge. And she said, oh yeah, I've got all that data. I said, well, can anybody find it? She says, well, I've got a spreadsheet. So we need to have some sort of discoverability for our users so that A, they know what's out there and they don't spin cycles researching new things. We have almost weekly people coming to purchasing saying, hey, I've discovered X. And so we're a box school, for example, and they have people coming to say, I'd like to spend money on Dropbox. I said, well, we've already kind of paid, we've gone down that road. We've paid for this. It's free. It's unlimited. It's all of this. Oh, I didn't know. And we've had it for 3 years, and I have 100,000 users. Most know, but not everybody. So discoverability is very important on your services. And this whole process with this group of stakeholders becomes a bottleneck for bringing in new services. I'll give an example. We have gotten to the point, so we have 4 data classifications at IU. Everybody slices and dices differently. We have public, university internal, restricted, and critical. And it has become such a backlog of requests that our security office will only look at something that is requesting access to critical data. They just don't have the cycles anymore to look at anything for restricted data. The majority of restricted for us or the majority of FERPA is restricted data. Not all of FERPA is restricted. But it just becomes a backlog. So if somebody comes in and they only want restricted data, the security office sends them to the data stewards, and the first question is the data steward says, well, what did the security office say? And so there's all this time wasted as people want these services, and some of them have done due diligence and come in and they said, well, I've done all this work, so I want it tomorrow. And it takes months, and that leads to, as my former boss used to say, you don't want to incent the behavior you don't want. So what we end up incenting is people going around us, paying the $100 a year or whatever for Dropbox and putting institutional data in the place where we don't have contracts, we don't have security review, we don't have any of those recourses that an enterprise contract can give us. So you've got to be able to develop capacity. You've got to create some sort of process to do that. And it's got to be reproducible. You've got to be able to just create this pipeline to put it through, identify the relevant questions, be able to have transparency so people know what contracts are there, and speed that up. So in order to help make this happen, because no institution, and IU is a big institution, no institution has the capacity to do this with all the other things, as Deb said, all the other things we've got going. So we have to rely also on the community. And Net Plus certainly plays an important role in this on the discovery and vetting contract side. There is also a program I'll mention in a moment. Well, I guess I'm going to mention now. Internet 2 has what's called a Cloud Proud program where they're working together to create a conversation around the cloud. The other working group is the Cloud Computing Constituency Group of EDUCAUSE. These are groups that when I took this new position, I joined just so I knew what's going on out there. How do schools know that these groups even exist? How do schools find the resources, the links to the conversations that are going on? There is, in EDUCAUSE, there's a working group called ECAR. They create a series of papers, and they have a cloud group. And the cloud group, we're working on putting out a series of papers right now about how to prepare and shift your university towards cloud computing. So the first 2 papers in the group have come out. If you're an ECAR institution, you get access to them right away. If you're not, I think in 6 months, they're available on the EDUCAUSE website for anyone. And I sent Andrew the link just a moment ago. We'll add it to the listing for this session. But the first paper is an introduction to the series. The second is around governance. The one that we're just about to finish is around the types of roles you need in your IT organization. We'll move on to more nuts and bolts, training because it is a very different mindset as you move more towards a cloud world for your institution. So another thing that's important about this level of collaboration is the need to aggregate the work that we're all doing. I mentioned before how my security office is a bottleneck. Well, the reality is we're doing the same darn security review that Arizona State's doing, that anybody else is doing. Why are we all doing the same security review? Can't we get together and say, here's the standard we want it to meet, and either have a working group or everybody pitch in some money to pay some security firm to put the good housekeeping seal of approval on it. Once it gets past that, it's got the higher ed security review seal on it. We can free up our security folks to look at smaller things or to do their day jobs in addition to these reviews. So that's the kind of power of the community aggregating the work that we're doing, because by and large, we're all doing the same thing when it comes to reviewing these services to see if they'll work for us. So my call here is for you all to get involved, whether you're just starting down the cloud curious path, or you're into the experimentation phase, or if you're a full-blown cloud first university, there are those out there, and get involved, because together we all benefit if we're developing some standards. We've certainly seen it on the purchasing side, the benefit of the standards that the Net Plus program is producing. But it's kind of like when you have the baby and you get it home and it's just you and your spouse and the baby, and you say, what do we do next? Well, it's better to have the community out there and to work together past the purchasing stage to implement these, and then learn on best practices. We were sitting down at lunch just yesterday. Arizona State's a Dropbox school, we're a box school, but there's a lot of common lessons there in provisioning users and deprovisioning users. Again, we have the same life cycle that Deb mentioned, those same realities. So we have a lot to learn from each other, a lot to share. And so I would just make a call that we all get involved. Thanks. I think there is one more. Yeah, there we go.
So thanks, Bob and Deb, for those great insights about cloud. I think we've tried to frame out a lot of information out there. I think we really would like to hear from all of you around your campus's experiences with cloud services. We have a few minutes left, maybe just 2 or 3 minutes. So I don't know if there are any questions or comments from the audience or things you'd like to follow up on. Yes.
Yes, I would like to ask the panel if they can share a little bit about how you went about the storage issue with Box or Dropbox. What are you utilizing it starting from user space to research space, and what did you do with your old gear and old staff who were supporting the on-prem storage?
Well, I would love to say that we've retired all the storage we had before, but we haven't. And there are certain challenges in there. So approval for what data is allowed in it is certainly one of them. Any of these cloud storage solutions, it's a bit of a paradigm shift for your users. Well, I'm not going to use that unless it's exactly the same way as my map drive before, that sort of situation. For example, at Indiana University, we have a strong virtual application deployment environment, so can the storage map to that? So you have to kind of meet the users where they are. Having said that, and I can just speak directly about Box, I'm often asked to compare the various storage solutions, and I can talk at length about that afterwards if you like, but there are some key pieces to understand. Provisioning, deprovisioning, content ownership is very different in the different storage solutions. So if we're in a department together and you create a file, what happens to that file when you leave and go to a different job? Does the file disappear and go with you? Does it stay behind? Those sorts of things you don't typically think about when you're just looking at the initial bells and whistles. What are the enterprise management tools, the user management tools? In fact, I'm on the Box Higher Ed Advisory Board, and there's a hot and heavy conversation going on right now about the difference of what happens to the content when you deactivate a user as opposed to delete a user. So those are the types of issues that you have to go down. I'll let Deb comment as well, because they're just rolling out Dropbox at...
So we are in the early transition stages with Dropbox at this point, and we are initially rolling out to a pilot group, which is our IT department of about 450 people, plus a couple of other departments that have asked to go first. Our plan is to decommission some of our existing SIF file storage that we use, shared file storage that we use for faculty and staff. We are only deploying Dropbox to faculty and staff at this point. We have no plans to deploy to the student population across campus at this point. That was a decision made by our Chief Information Officer. I just don't think we want to be in the business of being responsible or accountable for what students store, and they have their own Dropbox accounts for free anyway. So that's a very controversial issue for us right now, because I know other institutions have provisioned that for all of their student population. At this point, ASU has decided not to do that for the student population.
And I would just add quickly, I mean, I think it's a great question, and we could spend a whole hour, digging into it in more detail. But I would add quickly that, Box was one of the first Net Plus programs, and so over 100 campuses are deploying it through Net Plus. And I think it was around the 60th or 65th campus that signed up for Net Plus Box that really wanted to do a wholesale migration and decommission all their servers. So that school, and it's Morehouse College, which is a smaller school, right? Not an Indiana size or ASU size, but they went out and they found a tool called SkySync. They ultimately, which is a storage and synchronization software solution that kind of moves your data into and out of and between clouds, and they sponsored that for Net Plus. So I bring that up, as one technological tool that could potentially be useful as you're looking at how to do that kind of data migration, but also as an example of kind of how the community works and how Net Plus has evolved, so that, if we start out with a service like a Box that's developed and deployed by a number of campuses, another campus comes along and says, well, in my deployment, I actually want to decommission all these servers, and then they go out and they find a solution that helps do that, and they go through the service validation and develop it. We're running a little bit over time, but I saw another hand, so maybe we have time for one more question. Yeah. Sure, absolutely. Another great couple of questions that we could spend probably a half hour, an hour really diving into, but very quickly, Internet 2 runs the Research and Education Network infrastructure and is a community organization. So we're a nonprofit organization. We are comprised of our member universities, about 300 of them. We also work very closely with non-members. We also have community colleges that have joined Internet 2, specifically around cloud services. So the cloud services, the member-non-member divide to us is not that meaningful in the cloud services world, because we're all dealing with the same kind of issues and budget considerations and service evaluation considerations. So Internet 2, specifically around Net Plus, has been engaging and working very closely with non-member organizations. And so we'd be glad to talk with you about ways we might be able to work together. In terms of your specific questions about Banner and about assessing whether moving to cloud is right or not, what I've heard from a lot of campuses is that first of all, they need to decide and determine how much their existing services are actually costing before they can assess, is moving to a cloud service. If you're going to be decommissioning some legacy hardware, you know what the hardware cost is, you know what your staff time is, you know what the depreciation is. With an LMS or with a Banner or ERP type system, it's a little bit more complex to evaluate exactly how much that costs. So I think that the first step would be ensuring that you've got an appropriate sense of the financial costs for your existing technology investments, and then you can start assessing what the price is of a cloud service. Deb or Bob, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. Yeah, and we are running a little bit over time. So I want to thank you all for joining today, and thank Deb and Bob, and please join me in thanking them for their insights. We'll be around afterwards if folks want to talk with us as well. So thank you all.